Well, Dustin, good to be with you today, and we welcome everyone into Answering Pilot, the podcast. And we're going to be talking about from joke to woke,
okay,
and back again today, and hopefully it'll be informative and challenging, and we'll see what the Lord does with it. But I came across an article in the American Thinker from J.B. Shirk.
okay,
I didn't write down the title of the article. I should have, but it was something to the effect, political correctness ought to be put in the dustbin of history. And he gives us a little bit of history and background. If you're listening to this, I mean, you're familiar with wokeism, at least to a certain degree, and regardless of your age. But maybe, a lot of our folk were very young when we started to see changes in the American culture. Maybe they were a little bit older, but nevertheless, or maybe it was before they were born. But he sort of traces, just in sort of a highlight form, how wokeism came to be, at least the cultural, worldview of the day, and the thing that everybody has to buy into. And I think that started a little bit before, no doubt, but somewhere in the early 90s, as he says, we did witness a transformation of political correctness in real time. And so we just want to hit on that background just a little bit, and then obviously talk about where are we now? Where should we be? How can we get to where we should be?
Yeah, I definitely remember hearing about the PC movement, as it was called.
That's right.
That political correctness was definitely a buzzword term in the 90s. I was a teenager in the 90s, and so I definitely heard about that, and it was usually just used in a way to say you can't say things that are offensive.
Yeah.
Because it's not politically correct.
Right.
I thought it was really interesting in the article. He kind of delves into the background, because I was just thinking about it myself, that term, it was so ubiquitous. But what did it mean?
Right.
Why was it called politically incorrect?
Yeah.
To say these things. And I thought it was really interesting, the background that he gave there.
Yeah. In fact, Americans in general, when it first came out, that's not American.
Right.
We made fun of it.
Right.
We made fun of the whole concept of political correctness, and we kind of likened it to the types of things that were going on in communist countries, the Soviet Union in particular. And of course, the Soviet Union came apart, 1991, Berlin Wall fell in 1989. But nevertheless, we're still remembering. I mean, that's the way we were raised. At least I was raised. And again, I certainly love the Russian people, but we're talking about communism.
Right.
And, there's a big difference. We all recognize, at least over here, if you're in the Soviet Union, there's a big difference in what's true and what's officially true.
Yes.
There's a big difference in what you might say in private versus what you could say in public. Because if you said the wrong thing in public, you'd be put in prison.
Right.
And so in our culture, we kind of made fun of political correctness, like, that comes from communism. And it certainly does. It comes from Marxism and all the rest, as we've learned over the years, cultural Marxism, et cetera. But like you noted, over time, while we still recognize that, this is not a good thing, it's becoming a little more popular and a little more accepted. And so those of us who are sort of resisting, we'd say things like, well, now I know this isn't politically correct, but.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so that was kind of the terminology, just kind of our language. You would hear people use that kind of language when they wanted to say something provocative. Or I remember, and you remember this too, you just look at the average TV sitcom, 30-minute situation comedy. One of the bigger shows back in the day was Seinfeld.
Right.
And I remember them, they were talking about homosexuality. And, today, I mean, you talk about it very differently than you did then.
Right.
But they were talking something to the effect, well, he's gay, as if it
Not
were.
that there's anything wrong with that.
Not that there's anything wrong with it. Right.
Yeah.
So they were basically, on the one hand, saying, well, maybe there is something wrong with it. He's gay, but we're going to have to say not that there's anything wrong with it. But not only are attitudes changing, but certainly even situation comedies are like a pedagogical tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're well, for lack of a better word, sort of, they're teaching, but it's not just teaching, it's changing the whole mindset.
Yeah, comedy was really a way that a lot of the ideology that grips us so tightly today got introduced into culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it started out because, you know, early on, you know, in the 60s and 70s, there would be no homosexual characters on television. No, none of these things would even be, most people would probably be shocked,
right,
or at the very least put off
mm-hmm.
At the notion of these types of things. But then gradually they started to be introduced as comical characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was something that you would laugh at. And so, yeah, there was that PC thing to where, okay, we're going to laugh at it. We don't want to be offensive. But at the same time, it also put it in this package that was not threatening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, that guy's just funny.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, more and more so, you started seeing it become more and more prevalent in television programming,
mm-hmm.
in movies. And then it subtly started to change from, okay, well, now these aren't people that we can laugh at.
Right.
And then it became, you know, now we have to understand their trauma that they're living through
mm-hmm.
because of this identity that they have chosen, we would say, but they would say that they're born with and they can't help it.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden now they start to assume that victim status.
Mm-hmm.
And then it proceeds on to where we are now, to where you can't speak anything ill of certain classes, certain groups of people.
That's right.
Because it's politically incorrect. Like we said, in Soviet countries and in communist countries, literally politically incorrect meant that there were political or real world consequences if you were caught saying things against what the state would say that you could say.
That's right.
And so we're now moving towards that, now that even though the term itself has kind of faded into obscurity, we don't really use PC anymore,
mm-hmm.
politically correct anymore.
Right.
Like I said, the woke movement had kind of co-opted the language that was used there, but it's still the same. We're progressing towards that whole concept that if you say these things that are offensive, there's going to be real consequences for you.
Yeah. And you see it not just with, you know, we use the comedy situation and homosexuality, but you see it with more and more, as you alluded to, issues and dynamics. Right after 9/11, for example, you know, regardless of what we think about 9/11 at this point, who was involved and who wasn't, and how it happened and all that, maybe we can talk about that sometime. But, you know, there were certainly those who were involved and perpetrated it. And you actually flew planes into the Twin Towers, for example. And so these are committed Muslims and from that part of the world, the Middle East. And, you know, at first, you know, you could actually talk about that because that's what happened. But then very quickly, because I remember a West Wing episode talking about television.
Yeah.
Where, you know, on the one hand, you've got Toby, one of the main characters. If you haven't seen the West Wing, you really wouldn't want me to explain. But, you know, he's kind of angry at Islam, but others are calling him down for it. And you know, the whole show's able to talk about it. But shortly after 9/11, all of a sudden, in most circles, you're not allowed to even say anything negative about Islam.
Right.
For example, our soldiers found that out real quick, who were coming home from the, you know, Iraq and Afghanistan. And, you know, so often, I mean, you know how you're in a war, you're fighting, you know, the enemy. And regardless of whether or not we should be there or not, again, another topic of discussion. But they're going to have their own language about the enemy. I mean, regardless of the war.
Things that we don't see.
That's right. That's
on
right.
The battlefront.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they come home and they find out things have morphed from oh, we're making jokes now, to when you say something, now you're like, you can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, wait, what? I'm literally risking my life over here,
Mm-hmm.
and people are shooting at me, and my friends have been blown up, and I can't say this.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, there's all this political pressure and those types of things. And then of course you've got different kinds of, for lack of a better word, because this goes back even further, but it kind of morphs. You got all kinds of affirmative action programs. Now we call it DEI and things like that. But I think one of the things that came about, we're talking about a development, a progression. Today, you know, it's as if the way that black people are treated in America is just as bad as they were treated. I mean, and not just here or there, but all over. It's just as bad as it was in the 1960s.
Right.
I mean, in the 1960s, you know, and then the Democrats were in large measure responsible for these laws, but black folk couldn't eat at the same restaurant with white folk.
Couldn't drink from the same water fountain.
Right. And of course, that's where Rosa Parks and the bus and and all this stuff came from, the civil rights movement. But I had someone say to me recently, and it's almost like they just woke up. Do you realize that white people did ABC to black people back in the 1850s? I'm like, well, this is news to you?
Right.
And I don't mean that ugly. And obviously we abhor we abhor slavery. Mm-hmm. We abhor, mistreating people simply because of the color of their skin, or hating people just because of the color of their skin. Mm-hmm. We abhor that. But what we're talking about here is equating what injustices there may be in our culture with as one-to-one correspondence with the injustices of the 1960s or the 1860s, when you've got just as many injustices, actually more now, being perpetrated on white people.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like come full circle. Now, there again, I'll hasten to say, white people are not treated the same way that black people were treated in the 1960s.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, regardless of, who you are or what you're talking about, we need to be honest, and we need to be dealing in truth and dealing in facts rather than political talking points. So, again, not to get too bogged down, because we do want to make some, where are we going with this? But, there is a development. Mm-hmm. So now it's not only that you can't say certain things, now it's not now, but it becomes hate speech. Mm-hmm. And then hate speech, all of a sudden, now you've got hate crimes.
Right.
And so now certain things that you do or say are you're not only canceled, but you could be arrested, or you could get a different kind of prison sentence if you're deemed to have committed a hate crime. Say you murdered somebody, whether they're homosexual or whether they're black. Well, you don't just get a murder sentence. You get a hate crime sentence, which is worse.
Yeah, you didn't just murder them, but you murdered them hatefully.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand, because I don't know how you could murder someone, any person, no matter what they look like or what they sound like or where they came from. I don't know how you could murder someone without hatred.
Yeah.
So all murders would be hate crimes. But yeah, we've created this whole new category. So and in one sense, that kind of pushes down the severity of other crimes, and it elevates this now political crime, to use the PC vernacular there. That's actually worse. Mm-hmm. So now it's actually worse if you murder a black person or a gay person than if you murdered a white person.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And they're both evil. They're both wrong. They're both against God's word.
Right.
But now we've created something that somehow it's a new class. and it pushes down the severity of these crimes against these people who aren't in the protected class, and elevates that these crimes against others that are in a protected class as somehow being worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, what you're touching on there, protected class and all that. Now we're into critical theory, which is the sort of the full flower of the, the seeds that were planted way back when. And you cancel culture. Again, all of these things, you see in the political arena, there's always been, animosity, or some of it has the rancor hasn't, it's way worse now than it was, when I was younger, but there's always been fighting between the parties. But, the Republicans and Democrats could get together after a floor battle and have a drink.
Right.
That doesn't happen now, at least as far as we know. Now, we do know there are folk behind the scene. It's almost like this is again, another topic, but the uniparty, we know the Bushes and the Clintons, they're all big buddies, but we'll actually deal with that at some point, I imagine. Yeah. But I guess the point I'm making is you're using, whether you believe it or not, you're using wokeism to crush your political opponent.
Right.
For example, in our culture now. And so, all of these things, maybe if we could just tick off a few very quickly. Now we have toxic masculinity. And it's not just a subset. I think there's an entire generation or more of young men who've been told, particularly young white men, your whiteness and maleness, but even just maleness, is toxic.
Right.
And young men are being marginalized. And this is not our topic per se, but there again, you got more women graduating college now than men. And that's a problem. Why is that a problem? Well, we'll talk about it at some point, but part of the problem is men are checking out because they don't have a place in society anymore, which is a massive problem.
Yeah, we've definitely feminized our culture in a lot of ways, and a lot of this too is it's the outworking of this the sexual revolution, the LGBT movement, because it's perfectly acceptable and considered enlightened now to be an effeminate man.
Yeah.
But like you were saying, if you're a masculine guy, if you like to shoot guns and you like to, whatever,
be a man,
be manly.
Yeah.
What we always considered manly, that's toxic now.
Yeah.
And so that makes you a dangerous person. I don't know if you heard about the whole thing that was going around the internet a year or so ago, where they would ask the woman to make a choice. If you're alone in the woods, would you rather come across a man or a bear?
I do remember that.
And all the women would say a bear.
Yeah.
Over the man.
Insanity, right?
Because somehow a man, especially if he's a masculine man, is more dangerous to a woman than a wild animal.
Yeah. Tragic. I mean, a real man in that situation, he's going to give himself up for that woman so she can get away.
Right.
Anyway, just tragic. And so, now everything, you're racist, you're sexist, you're homophobic. This is the fruit of, ideas and ideas that have been foisted upon us. And I remember back in 1999, I was reading and studying a little bit about multiculturalism, which is, of course, is a subset of cultural Marxism or critical theory. And, it'd been around for a while, probably 80s, maybe late 70s, but certainly 80s, but it was only in academic circles. And of course, I was actually studying for a degree. And I remember, talking about the problems with multiculturalism. And I remember people asking me, well, wait a minute, I thought the gospel breaks down all barriers and people from different cultures and whatever, socioeconomic levels, male, female, et cetera, come together in Christ. Yeah, that's all true. That's all true. Well, what about the melting pot? Excuse me, that America's supposed to be. Thought that was a good thing. Well, you gotta define melting pot first off. Again, another subject, but at the same time, that's not what multiculturalism is all about. It's not about the melting pot. Multiculturalism is about identity politics. Multiculturalism is about maintaining your culture, and it plays into that whether you're Muslim or whether you're black or whether you're homosexual or whether you're poor. I mean, but if you're black, female, lesbian, poor, if you got these four categories, that's where what's the word? It just went out of my head. But you're in four different groups that are being oppressed. To go back to the language that you were talking about,
class.
Yeah, protected class, intersectionality.
Intersectionality.
Yeah. So, but the whole idea was that if you're not black, if you're not a woman, if you're not a lesbian, if you're not poor, there's no way that you can understand the suffering that my lived experience. You don't have my viewpoint, my standpoint. I don't even want you as an ally.
Right.
We're going to just be our own little group over here. And now you've got a splintering culture.
Yeah, because it's not just that you don't understand, but you don't have the right to speak on this.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So you put all of these things together, and I remember saying that this idea of multiculturalism, I'm talking about back in 1999, not that I have any prescience or that I'm that brilliant. To me, it's obvious if you've got people, all of a sudden we're fighting for our little group and we're not talking about an American society. We're talking about all these other little societies within this big landmass that just happens to be called America. And we don't have shared values. It doesn't take a genius to figure out this is going to create problems. It's going to create more and more division. I said in 1999, and by the way, race relations, just for anyone who's, younger than 30, I don't know, race relations from the early 70s up until President Obama, when was he elected?
2008.
08, yes, were improving. And I'm not saying there weren't racists around, if you want to use that terminology. KKK was active here and there in certain places. I guess in the late 70s or 80s, there might be some group out in the woods somewhere. I don't know. I'm just saying, and I don't want to be naive, but it's not what's driving our culture. I don't see any hooded Klansmen hanging out on the corner, which I did see. Because, again, I was born in 1964, so I've seen it before, but I was very, very young.
Right.
Excuse me. Sorry, I got something in my throat. Shouldn't even mention it. But anyway, if I hadn't mentioned it, maybe they wouldn't notice it.
Probably not.
Yeah. But anyway, what I'm saying is race relations, I mean, we got to almost, can I use this metaphor? We almost got to the promised land. we elected a black president.
Right.
Now, I didn't vote for President Obama because I disagree with him policy-wise and, politically. But at another level, and we were doing a radio broadcast at the time, live call-in talk show every day, and I remember saying on the air, no, I didn't vote for President Obama. In fact, we had a chance to interview him because of another co-host that we had, and he got the interview. I'm like, I don't know how you did that, but cool. I didn't do it, but anyway. But I did get to ask him some challenging questions, not in an ugly way. He really didn't have any answers for it. But anyway, that's another topic for another time. I tend to ramble a little bit. But I remember saying on the air, it's actually a good thing that we've come to a point where we can elect a black man president. And you know what? Even saying things like that now, still in this culture, and we're coming to some pushback. But what I'm saying and talking about is probably in progressive circles, it's probably setting their hair on fire.
Oh, absolutely.
That I can just talk about, the black man president and talk that way. It's somehow not PC. It's somehow racist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. Everything we say and do now is racist. But I think you and I both agree that this kind of philosophy is killing our culture, is killing our country, among a lot of other things. But a pushback or a backlash has begun.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, the title of our broadcast, from joke, we used to joke about it, to woke, couldn't hardly say anything. No, some of us didn't ever stop speaking, because Christians are called to speak the truth in love, no matter what the consequences. But more and more people are starting to push back. And obviously, I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you talk about pushback, and that's a good thing, why is it a good thing? Well, for one, it leads to a battle. Not that I'm looking for a battle. I'd prefer just a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I think serious people ought to be able to, ought to be able to, but ought to sit around and have serious discussions.
Yeah.
About big ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And try to come to the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's promoting a lot more dialogue, but I call it a battle because as well as I that we're in a spiritual battle. I mean, God tells us this.
Mm-hmm.
And in this battle, I mean, Paul says things like the weapons of our warfare. Well, that's battle language, right?
Right.
That's war language, obviously, the weapons of our warfare. But what does he say? Excuse me. He says the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they are mighty. And then here's what I wanted to key on. They're mighty to the pulling down of strongholds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what strongholds is he talking about? Because I know even Christians have a lot of notions as to what that is. But particularly in that passage of Scripture, he defines what he means. He says the weapons that we have are mighty for the pulling down of strongholds and every idea that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, the knowledge of Christ. That's right. And that's why he goes on to say we should take every thought captive in obedience to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So Christians need to have a biblical worldview. By worldview, I mean the lens through which you interpret reality.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, and ideas are part of that. And so we need to have a biblical worldview on everything, and we need to have a biblical worldview on the ideas of our culture. And, our culture, our society, government, everything should be rooted in truth, should be rooted in a biblical worldview. Now, Christians can debate, okay, with reference to government, what exactly does that look like?
Sure.
But we can't disagree and say, well, it's just got to be some kind of neutral, zone. Well, sometimes people use that word the wrong way. But again, I want to highlight the reality in the realm of ideas and in the realm of how we implement and what we implement. There is no neutrality.
Right.
Either what you legislate, what you make public policy, what you enshrine in law, it's rooted in somebody's worldview. So is it rooted in a biblical worldview, or is it rooted in someone else's worldview?
Right.
Or another worldview, a false worldview?
Yeah, and that's what, as Christians, we do need to be careful to, because like you said, the backlash is happening. And obviously, in a lot of ways, that's a good thing. And it's good for the gospel to push back against this. But there's a lot that are involved in this backlash that are not motivated by the gospel.
Right. Right.
I think about, we started out talking about comedy and how, that kind of crept in. Well, now there's a lot of comedians, for example, at the forefront who are pushing back against all this cancel culture that's out there, like a Dave Chappelle, for example. But Dave Chappelle, we're not gonna see eye to eye on pretty much anything with him. He just wants to be able to say the offensive thing.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to qualify that we don't want to just be able to say the offensive thing.
Right.
We're not looking to offend.
Correct.
But what we do want is for there to be able to be this discussion of ideas that you were talking about.
Right.
We need to be able to talk about true things in public without that being canceled as offensive.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a distinction that we need to make as Christians, that the reason that we're for free speech is not just so we can go around offending everyone.
Exactly.
That's not Christ-like to go around offending everyone. But at the same time,
just offending with the truth.
We want to speak the truth.
Sorry.
And the truth may be offensive.
Yeah, that's right.
But again, just like in some of the censorship movement that took place, a lot of Christians, I think, back in the day, to use that term, were on board because the things that were being censored are things that are not Christ honoring. They're things that we don't want our kids hearing.
Yeah.
And so, that's good. But there were also people that were involved in that movement that had no motivation of Christ again.
Right.
And so they just wanted to use it as a method of control.
Mm-hmm.
And so now that there's a pushback, we need to be careful not to just link arms with the Dave Chappelles of the world.
Right.
Because we want to be able to make a funny joke that offends everyone. But we do want to be able to speak the truth.
Yes.
Without it automatically being outlawed because it's offensive to someone. Yeah. Even though it's true.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I think to your point, well, you've made it. I don't really need to elaborate on that. I just know that when a biblical worldview is put forward, and a biblical worldview is embraced more and more. And again, we're not under the impression that everybody in America was saved back in the beginning. There was a lot of rough people in the early days of America and pagans and all the rest.
In the history of humanity.
In the history of humanity, of course.
Yeah.
But in some measure, maybe large measure, we'll debate about that. I don't know. But in some measure, for sure, America became more rooted in a biblical worldview. That's not to say that, again, everybody was Christian, or even all people who claim to be Christian were genuine Christians, et cetera. And it's not to say that Christians don't sin.
Right.
Of course we do. But at the same time, when you have a biblical worldview of economics or a biblical worldview of public policy, those are two big things. Right now, we're in an economic crisis. Right now, we're in a public policy crisis. Okay, well, when you have a biblical worldview guiding those two big dynamics, well, then here's a catchphrase from our day. It's going to promote human flourishing. So we're all about, our motivation ultimately is the glory of God. But we're also motivated for the good of others. And so things are going to be much, much better when you've got a biblical worldview driving the bus, as it were. They're going to be better for people spiritually, of course, but mentally, emotionally, culturally, relationally. More people that have a biblical worldview, the less impaired are race relations. That's what I say. Race relations were improving for a long time. And again, I know they don't want to hear this, but go back and look at the facts. President Barack Obama, above any other individual, he certainly wasn't the only one. You have these large movements and right and think tanks and all the rest. But in terms of any one individual, he did more to destroy race relations in this country since the 1960s than anyone I know. And it's a tragedy. But again, when you have these competing worldviews, there's always the potential for civil war. There's the potential for just collapse and so many other things we could put on the table. But I do want to move quickly because, we've got some things that we jotted down we wanted to touch on.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to touch on all these things in future broadcasts, and we're certainly not going to be able to touch on all of them now. But maybe we can just spend the last 5 minutes or so
mm-hmm.
that we have on expanding on what we were saying a little bit earlier. We want change in our country.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of other people, as you said, who don't share our worldview want change in our country.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them, like you say, just want to be able to say outrageous things or say the offensive thing or do things that you and I would never dream of doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Others are just sick and tired of being told, like, look, you take a guy like Nick Fuentes.
Mm-hmm.
He's a young man. He has a large influence over young men. You got to understand where he's coming from. I'm not a huge Nick Fuentes fan,
mm-hmm.
but I understand where he's coming from and why he's got a lot of followers. He's saying, I don't know if you've seen any of the interviews that he's done or even watched his podcast, but I mean, I think he'll say things like somebody will call him a racist and he'll be like, yeah, okay, I'm a racist. And I don't think he's claiming to be a racist. I think what he's doing is he's saying, it doesn't matter to me whether or not you call me a racist.
Mm-hmm.
You're not canceling me anymore. We're not taking it anymore.
Mm.
What was that song? Was it Twisted Sister?
We're not going to take it.
How did I remember that?
I don't know.
I wasn't a big Twisted Sister fan, but I remember that song. We're not going to take it. Isn't that,
yeah.
Anymore. Well, that again, I'd love to talk more about that, but that's what he said. We're done.
Mm-hmm.
You PC guys, we're done with y'all. We don't care.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking our country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at one level, that sentiment is a good sentiment. Sure. It really is. But as Christians, we don't want to just, quote unquote, take our country back.
Right.
We do want Christ to be exalted. And I think
mm-hmm.
Nick Fuentes would say the same thing. We have a little different theological view. I mean, another discussion. I don't want to get bogged down. But what I'm saying is, we're not going to, if all we're doing is aligning politically, and if all we're doing is fighting with these political weapons, by the way, I'm not suggesting that we don't have some political alliances
mm-hmm.
with people who may not be Christians.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that we don't have legitimate political weapons. But what I'm saying is, ultimately, if you want to change the culture, you have to have something that affects real change.
Mm-hmm.
Hearts have to be changed.
Yeah.
Minds have to be changed. Not just, okay, I got a majority, so we're going to implement this law. Well, what happens when they get a majority?
Right.
I mean, we're going back. Listen, the Republicans right now, unless something drastically changes, they are done in the midterms because of people. Well, Trump. We're not here to talk about Trump on this episode. Again, we will.
Mm-hmm.
But he's broken every campaign plank that defined MAGA. MAGA's gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, at least you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't people out there who aren't America first. Nick Fuentes would be America first.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be America first
mm-hmm.
in terms of what is meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So there are folk out there, but Trump's certainly not MAGA in terms of how they define it. And he's made a colossal error. And the Republicans, I think, surely are going to lose in the midterms. My point being, we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Dems, Republicans, Democrats, Republicans. There again, a lot of that's orchestrated by the Uniparty and those behind the scenes. Another topic for another time. But I'm sorry I'm rambling. But the whole point is, there's only one thing ultimately that will change hearts and minds in an ultimate sense, and that's the gospel.
The gospel.
And so when I say Christians, we need to be about the business of preaching the gospel, I mean for the glory of God, and I mean for the salvation of others, but I also mean a full orb gospel. not a truncated gospel that's reduced to the ABCs of salvation or the 4 spiritual laws, not only in terms of evangelism,
right,
but in terms of what the gospel is supposed to be in the world and what it does. The gospel transforms individuals, but it also transforms families and communities.
Every aspect of life.
And it transforms whole cultures, and it transforms structures within those whole cultures.
Right.
And by structures, I mean government and business and all the things that are, institutionalized in our culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be, as always, our message. It's always about Christ. It's always about the gospel. But only when the gospel spreads do you get rid of things like cultural Marxism, which is totally destructive. And history proves it. And we're living in it right now. And if you can't read your history book, I feel sorry for you. And if you can't see that we're living in it now and the walls are crumbling, I feel sorry for you. But you're blind. I'm praying, for a miracle that your eyes will be open.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it's destructive because it's anti-gospel.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
an anti-human flourishing.
Yeah. But that's why as Christians, we reject Marxism, communism, socialism. They're anti-gospel.
Yeah.
It's not because they're anti-capitalist or,
right.
Or any of that.
Right.
But so it's both sides of the coin there, to where the gospel's the only thing that can push that back.
Yeah.
But that's also why we want to push that back, is so that we can freely proclaim the gospel. Because we want people to hear it. We want people to know it. We want their lives to be transformed and changed, and we want cultures to be transformed. And so again, it's a circular thing. In that, this is the things that exalt themselves against the knowledge of God that we talked about. And so we want to push back against that with the gospel for the sake of the gospel. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about advancing the kingdom, and Christ is king, and the gospel overcomes.
Amen.
Amen.
The Answering Pilot podcast is a ministry of Randall House Church in Greer, South Carolina. You can learn more at www.randallhousegreer.com/church. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Randall House Church. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.